Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Keep Indiana Learning. I'm so happy that you're with us today because we are here to discuss Chapter 8 in our book study series, which is Keep Indiana Reading, our Digital for Good edition. And my name is Melissa Wally, and I'm an innovation coach with Keep Indiana Learning and an EdTech specialist with Hanover Community Schools in Cedar Lake, Indiana. And I also serve on the HEC board here in Indiana, and I'm an ISTE certified educator and work on many other things in my life outside of Keep Indiana Learning. I also want to give a little reminder that this book study series can be found on our YouTube channel for Keep Indiana Learning, along with many other book studies. So take a look there. And we have a team here today to talk about this chapter. And Diana's here as usual. Hello, Diana.
Hi, how is everybody today? I'm so excited to get on here and talk about this. So I'm Diana Knox. I'm a technology instructional specialist from Clay Community Schools over in Brazil. A little snowy here today, but it's kind of nice that we're getting a good winter to give us a preview of some things. Like Melissa, I'm an innovation coach with Keep Indiana Learning and an ISTE certified educator. I'm also a Canvas certified educator, and I actually work on our community foundation boards in our area, both for my county and then also for our area. So I like getting that experience with philanthropy. Today, as we get ready to discuss our final chapter of Digital for Good, gosh, this book has gone really fast. We are so excited that we have two very special guests joining us to join the discussion. Brittany, I'm going to start with you.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me back again. Diana and Melissa. I'm excited to talk about the book. I'm from Columbus, Indiana, where I'm the Assistant Director of EdTech. I'm also the President-elect for Indiana Connected Educators and also collaborate with these lovely innovation coaches for Keep Indiana Learning. And I'm an adjunct professor on the side. So all of the fun things, we're all involved in a lot, I'm realizing as we do these, these intros. So next up is Carissa.
Hi, everyone. So glad to be here. Thank you for having us. My name is Carissa Schwanekamp. I get to work with these lovely ladies through Keep Indiana Learning's innovation coaches, and then also have been working for Magic School for 7 months now, but previously was in Plainfield for 21 years. So lots of different roles in my life: special education, high ability STEM, instructional technology. And it's so great to just stay connected and learn and collaborate with people just like you. So thanks for having me.
Yeah, so this chapter starts out with this idea that I think all of us are so familiar with the idea that digital well-being cannot be taught in isolation. And I think that we know that, we've said that so many times, but then it kind of took a little spin that I was like, oh yeah, because I'm thinking it's like, oh yeah, you can't teach it in the classroom by itself. You have to integrate it into the curriculum. You have to integrate it throughout the day and throughout the year. Don't do this digital citizenship week, but that is not where it went. Where what it actually took a turn for was that it should be part of this digital citizenship team, a bigger picture of who is taking part in instructing our children on digital citizenship. And I really like the way that that went because although that seems obvious now that I'm thinking about it, it never really came to my mind that it should be this constructed effort. So, it specifically started with the parents being part of this team. And the author, Mr. Clatta, emphasized that students build those healthy habits, digital habits best when everyone's working together, the families, school, communities, not when the responsibility just falls on one person or space. And again, this is like this common sense approach. The idea that gives parents access to all the different team members and we're all pulling together and working together and taking our own strengths for the betterment of children. And then all of these key players in the team in the book also come into play: our tech providers and the government and schools. And I think what came to mind when I was thinking about it is this idea of working smarter, not harder. It's not one person or one group doing this heavy lift, but we're all working as a true community. And I just really love that idea.
I do too. I think so often that we need to do that unified front more often because the message cannot be heard enough. So he goes in and talks a little bit more about digital platforms that includes things like social media. They have a vested interest in ensuring that our users have a safe and healthy digital space. Um, there's been a lot of positive changes made to help identify concerning behaviors like hate speech, misinformation, inappropriate behavior, all what you can report posts. There are things that let us check age restrictions and requirements. We don't do enough maybe to protect our kids. They don't have to actually prove ages. I don't know. And I think it was earlier in some chapters here. I don't think it was a previous book, but they talked about how different countries approach that and that some countries really make social media platforms jump through some hoops. And I liked that protection. But I think that it's too easy for us to we give kids devices that are unfettered and they just can put things on them at will. And nobody checks to see that I'm actually 13 or I'm actually 18. So I really like this idea of those added measures to help protect against hate speech, to help protect age restrictions. The options that allow people to flag these behaviors, is that enough? Like, where do we need to go from here? Do we have norms on that? And do all platforms have these norms? Is there a code of conduct that is actually upheld? Sometimes you'll see people say, well, I was restricted and I don't know what I did. Sometimes I think that's another piece of education that we miss. We don't know the mistake that we made. If we don't know, how can we be accountable to not make that mistake again? We do this, like, think about digital classrooms. We establish norms for behavior and expectations, and we expect those to be upheld. Why can't that also be an expectation for our digital platforms that we involve or work with?
Agreed. I really liked that section that you just discussed, Diana, because it felt like a much more like empowering, almost positive twist on something that can be kind of messy sometimes. And I really liked that Mr. Collada gave those examples of like, it'd be great if the ads showcase like positive uses of social media, or like if you see something, say something, almost like what we do in schools if we see something concerning. So I think that just builds ideally a situation where we're more cognizant of that. I think we still have a little bit of a way to go until we could get to that point, but I do like a lot of the ideas that he shared in the chapter. And I actually have a colleague who was talking to me this morning about her middle school son who just opened his own Instagram account, and she was asking for advice on some of these things. And I even told her, I was like, well, actually, I'm reading this book right now that has some really cool conversations that you could have with him so that, you're having that positive and that open dialogue. So it felt very, very relevant, a lot of the pieces in this book. But moving past some of the like platforms and the public facing pieces, the next little section of the book talks about the local and federal government involvement in some of this work. And that's where I think it's really, really interesting. I know Melissa and Diana did a book study. I want to say maybe it was last year, Anxious Generation. And there's some overlap. I felt some commonalities in some of the text in this chapter with that, and talking about how there's some protections in place, right? There's oversight at the federal level for broadcast and public, media outlets, but there's not always that same degree of oversight into some more of these private and social media companies, which, kind of exempts them from responsibility and owning some of the inappropriate or harmful stuff that might be out there. Which I think is a little concerning. And then I just made me think of that book because the author had kind of even presented some stuff that different countries do that differently. And they put pressure on those companies to put safeguards in, even just the data privacy and protection acts in different countries are so much more thorough and detailed than maybe what we have here in the United States. The only US legal requirement is SIPA, so Children's Internet Protection Act. And there's not as many hoops for vendors, even textbook companies and things that we use to jump through. And it's always interesting being someone who has to look through data privacy agreements and decide, do we allow, do we not allow? Where if I see it's a European-based company, I know there's probably more safeguards there than there is just because of the difference in protections and legality pieces in those places. So I just think it's interesting that it's not as much ownership, whereas schools and libraries have more of those pieces because they have to adhere to SIPA. So I found those chapters to be really enlightening, and it just makes me wonder if as school districts we could do even more to advertise that and to say, so we have to follow these guidelines, but these other groups don't. So we can almost collectively push for change at the federal and local level. So those were just some of my takeaways from that section. Carissa, what about the schools and universities section? I think that was the next one.
Yeah, lots to think about and lots to continue to talk about. And I think as we're navigating AI and any technology topic, right, and balancing out and figuring things out, it is such a community effort, and not learning about these things in a silo and not trying to solve these problems and figure things out. That's why I think it's so important to be involved in a group like the Innovation Coaches at Keep Indiana Learning, or finding small groups within your school district or within your school building, because you cannot figure all of this out by yourself. And we're all constantly learning. And right, we want our kids to be lifelong learners. And here we are trying to model the same thing, which brings me to a few talking points when we look at this next section. So digital citizenship, not as an add-on, but part of your school culture, right? I know digital citizenship has been around for a long time. And it wasn't just like a one and done lesson that's taught in the classroom. It is something that, even the first educators that ever put a computer in front of a student and taught them how to use it, that was a constant conversation, right? Hug the computer, hold it like this if you're carrying it in the hallway. I remember being a part of those discussions. And so just like we're thinking about digital literacy and using AI and having screen time, and it's not just a one and done. It's like educating our own kids, right? When we teach them how to drive or use social media or anything important, it's not like, well, here's driver's ed. Hopefully everything works out when you're done. We're constantly working because we care so much for helping them not make any mistakes through the process. So I do think having it as a culture of your school, just really something to think about, not just an add-on or a box to check. Technology serving as your learning vision and not steering it. So not asking what can this tech do, but how does it help us do what we believe about learning, right? Not just using tech for the sake of tech, but how does this helping us reach our goals and priorities? Digital well-being being deeper than screen time, right? Don't measure it by the minutes. You get 20 minutes. I'm so guilty of that. Telling my first grader, you can have 20 minutes. And now I really need to back up and think, okay, what is he doing during that? Is it useful? Because if he's practicing his math facts for 20 minutes, that's awesome. If he's scrolling and has found somebody playing with toys online on YouTube for 20 minutes, where is the value? So, but then I think about modeling myself, right? I have to take a step back and think about, how do I model what screen time looks like in my use of technology? Am I also stuck at night when I can't fall asleep, just endlessly scrolling and thinking that I'm taking in and digesting things that are important, but not really? So how much it matters for us to model as adults, but also to the students in front of us, what this could look like. And not all screen time is created equal. And just digital citizenship, a part of the entire school ecosystem, I think is kind of my last point. Not isolated to, you're the computer science teacher, so you will teach this for 30 minutes once a week, but really it's a culture, it kind of goes back to that first point, across, we're all accountable for this, right? So those are my takeaways. Lots to think about. Melissa, what do you think?
Yeah, I love what you said there at the end about like you're the computer science teacher, because I think we all have to be responsible for, being on that team. And as a team, we don't just say, "Well, that's your job." No, that's part of a team. Is that we're doing it together. Just like we're all working towards improving writing, so we're all going to work on that. We are all working on being good digital citizens. We don't divide up and say, okay, this teacher's going to work on making sure our kids are active listeners. No, we all are. We're doing all of these things together. It's just as important. Um, but like the next part is that there are some team members that maybe are what were called missing team members because they should be on the team, but then they're not. And the ones that really stood out to me were the researchers because we have such a need for research and strategies to support digital well-being and healthy digital citizens. There's so much that we don't know. We're just kind of learning as we go, building the plane as we fly it. Sometimes it feels like, but there's just not this push to fund research in the same area. So how can we improve if we don't know what exactly needs to be done or what we should be doing? Um, so that was one area as I thought that like though that's a missing part of our team is researchers. And then another one that was mentioned, and I feel a little bit conflicted even saying it, are librarians because librarians really have come to mean something different than it did previously. Like when I think about what a librarian was, when I was younger, even when my children were younger, looks different than it does now. Like libraries are much more active spaces now, and books have even become digital, and students have gained this online access. So programs in the library have offered digital citizenship lessons and units in the school. And so not all librarians are missing team members. I think that that varies, and I've seen some really good examples of digital involvement, even from public libraries. So our libraries are so important for our communities. And then uh, as I thought about it, I thought about their budgets and their staffing issues that they have to work around too. But how can we intentionally bring libraries into the conversation, whether it's our school libraries or our public libraries? I just think it's something that we need to intentionally do and think about as we are forming our teams.
Almost forgot to unmute. Rookie mistake. Um, Caught myself though. Those are such good points, Melissa, because if we truly are going to treat this as a team sport, we've got to make sure all the players have a seat at the table, and take that piece of it. And I think it's important to remind ourselves that families need a lot of support and not judgment in this navigating this tech world and what's right and what's good and how much of a good thing is too much. And I think that's where I really love the suggestions that we get in this book. It's not um, all or none. It is balanced, because I think it is not feasible to think that we're going to completely protect our kids from tech until they're a magical age. I think that it's also not fair to just give them a device that's wide open and unfiltered, because they don't know, and families may not know. So we have to take this team approach where schools treat our families as partners in this process, and we can offer resources and language and simple strategies, because this is an area that has infiltrated our space, and we're working to be trained on how to do some of the management of it. And the last thing we want is for our students and our families to feel guilt or criticism for imperfect tech habits they may have. But, circling back, I can't remember if it was Brenny or Carissa, and it might have been both of you hinted at it, but it's the quality of the screen time that really matters, like what it is that you're doing. And helping people understand that it's not just quantitative. So collaboration prevents blame, from any single group. And I love how Mr. Collada cautions against blaming parents, teachers, or the technology itself as problems arise, because it really is something we just need to address altogether.
Agreed. And I think a next step in that is helpful, if you're not playing the blame game, then what do you do? What's the next step in this process? And that's really just involving everyone in the conversation. And I really love that the author talks about students being critical, the learner themselves, in that conversation and setting those guidelines and those healthy habits, and just having that open dialogue about anything and everything just sets everyone up for success. The student might have opinions about, this is what I'm using screen time for. Like I was doing something that maybe is much more active learning, or maybe I was doing something passive, and having those conversations about like our own TikTok habits late in the evening. I'm guilty of that as well, Carissa. I was doing it last night and was like, I need to go to bed because probably an early wake up in the morning. And I was watching silly cat videos. So, I think it's important that we start those conversations, and that students and the other team members referenced in this chapter all have opportunities to share their expertise and also to ask questions from the other groups, because all of us have strengths and things to contribute in different areas, and you really can't go it alone, and going it alone is overwhelming. And that's why it's nice to know that there's a team of people to be there. So when we have students included, we just set ourselves up for success, because they can help us co-create the guidelines and expectations and solutions. And then it just empowers them to continue to make good decisions moving forward.
Totally agree. That student lens, we get so caught up with our teacher lens and what we think is best and viewing things, and we think we've seen all the angles. But talking to students, we hear things that we wouldn't have thought of. I like in the AI world, when we talk to students about AI use, like they're kind of sick of people thinking that all they want to do is cheat with AI, right? But like that's a big fear for us. It's a big fear for teachers to lose control and that plagiarism piece. But there's so many kids that will tell you, yeah, I don't actually want to do that. I want to preserve my voice. So I do think being very open to that student voice and the lens that they're seeing things through can really open us up to other viewpoints as well. I think there were three kind of like strong next steps, takeaways for me in my notes here at the end. So instead of calling it screen time, really think about it as screen value, like we talked about before. Like what is the value add of the time that you just spent? I'm super guilty for wasting time thinking, oh my gosh, I probably could have finished an entire book in the time that I just spent scrolling. So the screen value, right? But like even talking to students, like you said, like what are you doing? Maybe we didn't see the value, maybe there is value, like having that conversation. Kind of going back to that, every teacher has a role in digital citizenship. It is not just the computer science teacher or the librarian, but everyone has a stake, right? It's a huge part of education, even bigger than it was 3 years ago before ChatGPT and AI. Like it's only going to continue to be more important, that it is, we all own the topic, right? We own it across the entire district with all of our students. And then really making digital citizenship a part of your vision. The quote was, if it's not in your mission, then it's probably not a priority. And that's so true, right? We think a lot about our mission and vision statements and what's really important. And people will ask us, like, it really does need to be a part of it. The digital impact across, our students' lives, it's there forever. We maybe didn't grow up with all of this technology, but I think about my first grader who has always known what an iPhone is, right? Like when I show him how to use something, he immediately knows where speech to text and read aloud is. Those are things that, we had to learn that this generation of students does not. And so keeping the conversation front and center and really a part of your priorities, I think is really important as we're all trying to like figure this out together.
Yeah, those are great next steps, and there are so many. Like I just feel like there's so much to do here. So with that, we have our final challenge for chapter 8. Every chapter we've had a little challenge, and so this time it's introducing a digital pause routine, and I like. just like that phrasing. But you're going to designate time in your class schedule, or it could even just be in your day, to kind of pause and reflect on how students or yourself are using technology. And you could use prompts like, how did this tool help your learning today? Or was that a good use of your time? And just, modeling that. Um, Eventually you can give students the lead in that reflection and allow them to kind of take over the conversation, because one of the things that we need to do for all students as we continue to use technology is to model appropriate use and share our inner dialogue. That's really important to help them learn what to do, not just what not to do. And modeling that think aloud process about how we use our time and how we like to learn is important. And it allows us to be good role models, and then also give our learners permission to use tech intentionally. Like, we don't want them to always think like screen time is bad, because it's not. It's not all created equal. We've said that. And it does help them become an active member of our team. And sometimes cat videos are okay. Like, it's okay to do that. Um, so yeah, I think that just that modeling is super important.
Oh gosh, so much good discussion. And as we get ready to close today's conversation, we're reminded that digital well-being isn't something that students figure out on their own. Instead, it's something that we build together. And when families, educators, and young people all play an active role in this, we create a community where healthy, balanced digital habits come from and they can thrive. Uh, we are so glad that you joined us today as we continue learning how we can support one another in becoming thoughtful and connected digital citizens, and really have that strong impact on our students. Brittany, Carissa, we're so glad that you could be part of the conversation today, because I know these topics are also something that you are passionate about. And this topic is so important. We actually only have one more wrap-up session for this book study, and then we're going to close the book on digital for good. So we hope that you join us next time.